This video will show demonstrations of several things, but it's starting out by showing how to reuse what were the test plates from some of my other videos. So to begin with, I was actually sticking it back in the acid after it was cut off of one of the plates that I was testing for another class. I pull it out, check and see how much it's been smoothed out, probably put it in for a half hour at first, and then put it in for another half hour. Here you can see that the lines have evened out a little bit more, trying to take the texture down now with a scraper. Now this may seem like an awful lot of work, but it also seemed to me like a waste of copper to have these little plates that I could turn into something else. So I was doing it with a couple different plates here. Both of them had already been in the acid bath for a little while, and now I'm using both the scraper, but I decided to use a couple different files on them to try to take down the lines a little bit. So you're trying to not have any more indentation in the plate where there was a grid that was actually bitten into the plate using the ferric chloride from before, and then working back and forth with using the scraper. And then the other plate, that second one that I showed you, I ended up cutting that one in half because the bottom part was just, the smaller part was just kind of obliterated by leaving it in the acid too long. So you really have to watch that. You don't probably want to leave it in there for more than an hour at a time. And then besides using the scraper, I decided I would use a little bit of just regular sandpaper. And there's still a little bit more that is showing up in there, but I flattened it out a lot. So I put a little bit of oil on it and use the burnisher to flatten down the lines just that much more. It is not going to be a perfectly flat, smoothed out plate, but it will be usable again. So here I'm using a little liquid abrasive cleanser, and actually I used a little dishwashing liquid there too to get all the oil off, make it so it's totally oil-free so I can transfer an image onto it. So I'm actually going to be using the toner transfer method that I've shown before in another video, where I have made up the design on Photoshop, doing it digitally, and then printed it out into transparency, and I'm going to stick it down, transfer it onto the plate by slowly heating it. All of that method can be seen in another video, but I'll show it here. I'm slowly, even though it looks very quick here, I am slowly heating this up and rubbing vigorously the image onto the plate, going by about 25 to 50 degree increments on this hot plate until it gets up to about 325 degrees. Now what I have learned is you don't want to take the plate off of the hot plate once you are done transferring the image, and you'll see that here is that I'm still peeling the transparency off while it's hot. Otherwise you can get kind of little air bubble spaces on there. So because this was not perfect, the transfer was not perfect, some of that grid still shows up, I'm going through with some stop out varnish to fill in some areas, partly because I've used text in this image. It's not completely abstract as an image, and the text, just some of the letters aren't going to show up as clearly if there's a line running through them. But I put that on there and let it dry, and then stick it into the acid bath, probably for about 15 minutes. Then I sprayed it, just kind of misted it with some spray paint to make kind of an aquatint on it. That's going to darken up some of the lines that are on there. Put it back in the acid for probably about 15 minutes again. I did that, repeating that process probably about 4 different times, so that I would have a nice dark line. And then I'm stopping out what is kind of the background where the text is at, and the interior cross form of the cathedral floor plan. The reason I'm doing this is I want to stick that back in and do more of an open bite of a larger area, and also I'm reinforcing some of the architectural lines in the cathedral floor plan, the drawing for that. I need different levels to this plate because I'm going to actually print it in a color process called color viscosity etching. we'll look at that as I roll different colors on and ink it up in different ways. So after that sat in for probably another half hour, 45 minutes, I'm cleaning it off first with mineral spirits. The mineral spirits are going to take off the stop out, the hard ground that's on there, but then I just put acetone on there. I have to use both of these because the acetone is going to remove both the toner and the spray paint. After that, I decided that I wanted to use some soft ground etching on here. Right now, I'm not doing it to make any kind of texture. What I'm really doing, and this is on the hot plate at this point, is I'm actually kind of inking the plate with the soft ground. Now, you wouldn't have to do this to get the exact effects that I'm doing. You do need to do it, but to get the different levels. So as I wipe away with the tarlatan the excess of the soft ground, it actually fills in the lower lines just like inking a plate would. Then I stop out the interior section because what I'm trying to do actually is reverse the image as to what is in relief and what is in the intaglio area. And so I put it in the acid, looked at it, it wasn't deep enough. I probably used that for maybe a half hour and then did it again. So it was at least an hour that was in there. But I still need the entire background to go down another level completely. So I stop out the kind of the foreground area, and then right now I'm doing an open bite. I'll end up doing an open bite of that area that's right around the cross. So do that probably for another half hour. And then right here, I'm doing just the area that is kind of the cross area. And all that area that had been had the soft ground and had already been reversed just needs to go back that much deeper as a whole large open bite. So I'll stick that in again for another half hour, maybe 45 minutes or so, and then I'm ready to do the inking. So I have to do different consistencies for this yellow. I'm actually using some plate oil. You can use different kinds of oil to do this. I really suggest that you look at either the process of Stanley Hayter or Krishna Reddy to figure out how to do this the best way. But I have thinned that yellow out with oil, so it is a very thin, oily ink. The red I am stiffening. Both of them came straight from the tube, but then I'm modifying both of them. So I'm using magnesium carbonate, that white powder, to make a much tackier, stiffer ink with the red. I'm going to use the two different consistencies along with a regular intaglio inking to do a mix of colors and get variation in the colors when I print this. So the yellow inking will go right over the top surface of the plate. The red that I'm inking up right there, it is a softer roller, and it's going to be rejected by the yellow when I finally put that over there, over the surface. And, well, you'll see exactly what happens. So first, here we use the green ink. You're going to put this into the plate, making sure you get into all of the tiny little crevices, the same way you would do just a regular black and white etching. So I'm using that little piece of card, put it in all those crevices, then I wipe it a few times with the tarlatan to make sure that I'm getting every bit of excess ink off. I wipe it down really well with this newsprint, or just a piece of newspaper would work as well, to make sure that there is nothing, no ink, green ink left on the surface. Then I put down another piece of newsprint. I'm going to put down a couple pieces of plexiglas on either side. They're kind of runners for that red roller. But here first I put the yellow on there. You can kind of go back and forth over that, but you don't want to press too hard to get into any of the lower crevices. But I do press hard with the red roller. This made a mistake in that it didn't roll all the way across. I kind of make up for it, but you'll see that there's kind of a red line where there's too much ink on there. You saw what I was showing you on that roller was that some of the yellow actually attached to the red, but you'll still see where it's yellow on the plate. They reject each other because of the different consistencies of the inks. So I look at the first one, There are things that I definitely want to change. I don't like that light green area, so I'm going to have to darken that up later. But I also see kind of yellow to orangish dots on there, and I was first scraping some of that and burnishing it down so I would have a lighter area over kind of the cross form. Then I'm putting a hard ground over the entire surface. I also, you can see I tested it with some different colors and I didn't like that color combination. Right here I'm going through in that area that's just around the cross form, but not the background. It's in deeper into the plate, but it wasn't really holding the ink because I did so much open biting to it, and it was coming up as white or a very light green. So I decided I wanted that to be a darker color, and I ended up biting that down for probably an hour with kind of some cross hatching in it. Right there, what I was doing was adding a texture, a soft ground texture, to the area of the cross. There were some parts of that that I felt needed to be darkened up a little bit so that they weren't just pure yellow when I printed it. So I roughened those up a little bit by adding some soft ground texture, just a light soft ground texture, so that those little orange dots that I showed you before wouldn't show up in quite the same way. So here I'm inking it again the same way that I did before, with the green, the yellow, and the red, and just testing to see where it sits this time. The thing about this method is that the humidity can affect things during a certain day. Mixing the ink so that there is a slightly different consistency. You notice that I'm rolling that back off so that the yellow gets off of that roller before I use it again. So here I'm putting the dampened paper back onto the plate and running it through, and this one ends up being much greener. The final color that I decided on still used the same green and red, but I chose more of a golden yellow that still comes out fairly yellow. But I liked how the colors mixed on that a little bit more. You really will have to experiment with different color combinations. It is very difficult to understand exactly how they will work until you do many experiments, and it basically takes you years to figure out how those are going to work with each other. I tend to look to artists who have used this process before, again, particularly Dick Swift and Stanley Hayter, and see what color mixings they used to give ideas for myself. So after I print this, you can see what the colors are. It really helps to get better consistency to use a larger form of roller instead of the smaller brayers that I'm using, because you can't work very much larger than this, but you can see the slight variations among the different prints here. And this was a very brief, though it was a longer video, it was a very brief look at this process. So I encourage you to look both online and in books and actually at the real artwork to get better ideas of how you might use this process for yourself.